I'm going to file for Social Security benefits at age 62. I want to get my money now. I hear that pretty frequently. So today, I'm going to talk about 8 reasons why you might not want to claim Social Security benefits as early as age 62. I'm Elliot Apple, founder and financial planner of Kindness Financial Planning, and today we're talking about Social Security and why it may make sense to wait to claim benefits. Reason number 1 is if you have less than 35 years worth of earnings history, it might make sense to work an additional few years. And the reason for this is because the way Social Security is calculated is it takes your highest 35 years of earnings to calculate your Social Security benefit. So if you have a few years that have $0 of earnings, your Social Security benefit might be lower than it otherwise could. But the key here is to understand how much your benefit could potentially increase, and you can actually calculate this using Social Security's tool online, and you can plug in future earnings to see what that would do to your benefit amount. The other key thing to keep in mind here is that your earnings are not all created equally. And what I mean by that is the way that Social Security is calculated is it assigns greater benefits to lower amounts of earnings. So the certain amount that Social Security is paying back with that average index monthly earnings, the way that that's calculated is each year is a little bit different for people turning age 62 in that year. So for example, for people turning age 62 in the year 2025, you're going to get back 90% of any amount that you earn per month up to $1,226, 32% up to $7,391, and only 15% on amounts above that. This is often known as the bend points within Social Security, and that's really important to keep in mind that those first $1,226 in earnings per month is going to pay back quite a bit. The next amount's going to pay back some at 32%, but amounts above that at 15%, it's not going to make a huge difference. So if you already have earnings in the past where you got above that first break point, or maybe somewhere in that second break point, likely earning additional money might not make a huge difference, because when they calculate those earnings, they are adjusted for inflation. So the amount that you earned 20 or 30 years ago, maybe you earned $40,000 per year, that's going to be adjusted up to account for today's dollars. Reason number 2 that you may want to delay Social Security benefits is that if you're still working, you might be earning too much and potentially reduce the Social Security benefits that you're eligible for, or eliminate them entirely. And this is between age 62 and full retirement age. So the amount that you collect in Social Security benefits can change based on what you're earning if you're below full retirement age. So let's say you're age 62 and it's the year 2025. If you earn more than $23,400, that means that for every $2 that you earn above that amount, you're going to get a $1 reduction in benefits. And that's really important to keep in mind. These benefits are not lost for forever. They're added back once you are eligible for benefits again, but it can take people by surprise if they think, hey, I'm going to collect my Social Security benefits and I'm going to continue to earn money. Well, if you earn too much money, that can actually reduce your Social Security benefit. In many cases, it makes sense just to wait to claim that. In the year that you reach full retirement age, often it's a $1 reduction for every $3 in earnings. And then once you are past full retirement age and you're still working, that's totally fine. You can claim Social Security benefits and earn money. There's no reduction in benefits. Reason number 3 why you might not want to claim Social Security benefits early is if you expect to live till about age 80. And I say about to just because there's a range here depending on what sort of discount rate you want to use with Social Security, because you have to take money from somewhere, whether that's an investment portfolio, savings, or continue working. So if you assign a discount rate to this, like you're going to take income from somewhere else, that break-even point tends to be around age 80 for folks. So everybody has a personal calculation, whether they're married or they're single, or they can plug into a tool and say, hey, if I live this long, how much in benefits would I get if I start at age 62, or if I start at 64 or 67 or age 70? You can do that calculation to see where does that make sense to claim. And if I live beyond that point, maybe I'm earning more by waiting to claim benefits. For a lot of people, that number tends to be age 80. But again, you'll want to run this through a tool because it's really a personal decision based on your specific circumstances. And I'm going to show you later on an example in a Social Security tool to show what does that break even look like and what are you giving up in those early years, but what are you gaining if you end up living a little bit longer. If you find this kind of information helpful, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Reason number 4 why you might want to delay Social Security benefits and not claim at age 62 is if you don't like a huge reduction in your Social Security benefit. If you claim at age 62, that's roughly a 30% reduction in benefits compared to claiming at full retirement age, or if you're born in 1960 or later, that age is age 67. Now, what does that mean in terms of an annual figure? Well, you could think about it as a gain every year of waiting of roughly 6 2/3% per year for the first 36 months. And then after that, 5% per year. It's also important to know that that figure actually goes up once you hit full retirement age. So once you hit full retirement age and between age 70, it's actually an 8% increase per year. I don't know anywhere else where you can get that sort of guaranteed payment or guaranteed increase that's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. So for a lot of people that want to claim it early, just know that you are not getting that increase per year. And that's not even to say of the increase in the cost of living adjustment. So there's a cost of living adjustment. You'll also get that in addition to that regular increase. Reason number 5 why you might want to wait is if you are married and you're the higher earning spouse. Sometimes I run into people and both spouses want to claim as early as possible, and potentially one spouse is earning a lot less than the other, so their primary insurance amount or the amount they're going to get from Social Security is a lot less. That can be problematic because the nice thing about a married couple is that if one person passes away early, you can claim a survivor benefit, and usually you get the larger of those two benefits. So by preserving the person who has the highest earnings amount, you can get that for the longer of their 2 lives. And I'll show an example of this down below on how much of a difference that can be. It can be $1,000 a month or more, and that's really important to keep in mind that if you both claim early, those benefits are the amount that you're going to get for the rest of your lives. And if someone's claiming early, that reduction, that locks that in place with very few exceptions. Now, there are some exceptions to this, and why it's important to run your analysis through a tool is if you have a spousal benefit and you have higher earnings, maybe your spouse didn't qualify for benefits, it might make sense to claim early. If you have young children at home and they're entitled to benefits based on you claiming Social Security benefits, or a child who's disabled that's eligible for that, sometimes that can make sense to claim it early. So it's not an always if you're the higher earning spouse, it makes sense to wait. There can be some differences in ages, differences in benefits, and additional benefits that you're entitled to that can change that calculation. Number 6 is the fact that you may be okay concentrating risk for a first few years of retirement and then not having as much risk for a much longer period of time. And what I mean by that is if you delay Social Security, and let's say you don't claim it at 62 and you live off savings, investments, or you continue to work, essentially what you're doing is you're concentrating your withdrawal rate in those early years. So you're likely going to have a higher withdrawal rate and then a much lower one later on. Now, if we flip that and we say, hey, I'm going to claim benefits at age 62, I'm going to have to claim a higher percentage of my investments for a much longer period of time over my life. So with people that I've worked with in the past, there might be 5, 6, 7 years where they retire a little bit early. They're living off their investments, which means they're going to draw those down a little bit more. But then after they reach that age 70 and they've got the highest benefit possible that they're eligible for, they're going to take a lot less from their portfolio. So it does concentrate some risk in early retirement, but it means that there's less demand on the portfolio for usually a much longer period of time. Because if you're age 70, there's good odds for a lot of people you're going to live to 85 or 90 or 95. And at that point, you have 2 decades or so where you're going to have a much lower withdrawal from the portfolio. So you're not putting as much pressure on it. So waiting to claim Social Security can actually help alleviate the portfolio in those later years. It does concentrate risk a little bit in those earlier years. But the nice thing is this is a year by year, month by month decision that, let's say sequence of returns are poor in your early retirement. If you really don't want to keep withdrawing from the portfolio, you theoretically could claim Social Security benefits at that point. Maybe you were set on age 67, but you decide, hey, I'm 3 years in, it's age 65. I don't feel as comfortable waiting now. I can make that claiming decision at that point in time. So don't think about this as I have to stick to a strategy. You can make adjustments along the way. Number 7, if you're eligible for survivor benefits, sometimes it makes sense to get that survivor benefit as early as age 60 and allow your own benefit to accumulate and earn the highest amount possible until age 70. It's not for everybody, but it is worth mentioning that if you're a widow and you qualify for some of those survivor benefits, sometimes it does make sense to claim that survivor benefit early to allow yours to accumulate to that higher amount. And that's something that you don't want to miss out on. I've talked with people in the past where they just haven't approached it or haven't approached Social Security about that claiming decision. And it's too bad because they're eligible for some benefits that they're missing out on. And finally, number 8, tax planning. This is a big one that a lot of people don't take into account. And what I mean by this is there's opportunities for Roth conversions, maybe a 0% long-term capital gains bracket, or healthcare premium tax credits that you might be eligible for to help pay for healthcare. Those are 3 common strategies that I see early retirees focus on. But unfortunately, if you're claiming Social Security benefits, that's money that's coming in that is essentially forced income, but a forced income that people are welcoming, that allows less room in a tax bracket. So let's say you both start claiming Social Security benefits and that's $50,000 per year. That's $50,000 less that you might otherwise be eligible for hundreds of dollars per month to help with the healthcare premium tax credit. Or it might eat into the ability for you to recognize long-term capital gains from your portfolio, to reposition it, maybe to make it less risky as you enter retirement, or just to take some money off the table for withdrawals. It also doesn't allow for Roth conversions potentially. If you have $50,000 of income, that's $50,000 less that you could convert within that bracket. So it's really important to keep in mind that if you claim Social Security benefits early, you're not allowing yourself the same tax planning opportunities as someone that defers it. Now, tax planning, I will say, is secondary. You want to run the Social Security analysis and see how does it make sense to actually optimize the benefits over your life or your joint lives if you're married. And then from there, layer in the tax planning opportunities. Now, what happens if after watching this video or you run the calculation, you decide, hey, I claimed benefits early. Oops, I didn't actually want to do that and I want to undo it. What are my options now? Well, if you're within 12 months of filing, there's good news. You can withdraw your application and pay back the benefits that you've already been paid. So this is kind of like a, oops, I want to do it over again. Let's make it net zero. But the key is it has to be within 12 months of that filing or receiving those benefits to be able to undo that. If you're after that point, you can't withdraw those benefits. The other option is if you're after full retirement age or you reach full retirement age, you can suspend your benefits to receive some of those delayed retirement credits or that 8% per year that I was talking about earlier. You could say, hey, I claimed maybe at 62, and then it's now your age 63. You're like, well, I can't do anything yet, but I could wait to age 67 if that's my full retirement age, and then say, hey, I want to suspend it and I'm going to wait until age 70 to get that 8% increase per year. That is another option if you do want to sort of undo it, but not completely. There's 2 reasons I want to talk about that I hear often frequently from folks in different videos and online articles or online forums that I don't necessarily agree with, and I want to pay specific attention to them because I think they're really important ones. Some people are worried about Social Security going bankrupt, and I think the news articles do this a real disservice because when we talk about Social Security, when we talk about it going bankrupt, there's 2 sides of it. There's people paying in today, like I'm paying into Social Security, and potentially you are paying into it as well. And then there's a Social Security trust fund that pays out some of those benefits. Current estimates are that roughly if that trust fund went away, and that's the amount that they're talking about going bankrupt, benefits would still be paid out at a rate of roughly 75%. So I don't want to say that's the worst case scenario because I don't know what the future holds, but as of today, if we just assume, hey, that trust fund goes away and people who are paying in continue paying in, about 75% of your benefit would still get paid out. And I know that's not great to hear. There's a lot of easy ways to fix Social Security. It's just a matter of some politicians touching it and actually being proactive about it. They've done studies. Most likely you're going to see an increase in taxes would be my guess, but who knows what the world holds as opposed to a reduction in benefits. That would be a very, very poor choice by politicians to reduce Social Security benefits. You can imagine how quickly they would get voted out of office. So I think that's really unlikely, although it is possible. But my point in all this is that if you claim Social Security benefits early, and let's say that Social Security went bankrupt and it's still paying out 75% of your benefits, would you rather have that 75% of the lower amount that you claim at age 62 or a higher amount at age 70 or some later date such as 67 where you're getting a higher benefit? Personally, I would rather have the 75% off the higher amount. I don't want the reduction off the lower amount there. I want to get as much benefit as I'm eligible for given my life expectancy to help optimize those benefits. So I think Social Security going bankrupt is a very overblown thing of, hey, I'm worried about there not being any money. There's still going to be money of people paying in. So keep that in mind as you're making your decision about when to claim Social Security. The other thing I would say is maybe I'm better off getting the Social Security payment and then investing it. I'm more comfortable with that. That is an option, but I think it's one of those things where when we talk about the rate of return that you're earning, somewhere between 5% to 8%, depending on how long you're delaying it, that's a guaranteed rate of return by the government. It's pretty hard to go out in any single year and say, hey, I'm going to get 5% or I'm going to get 6 2/3% or 8% increase per year. There's just no way to guarantee that in any sort of investment that has the same risk level of a Social Security payment that's backed by the government. So you can get it. Maybe that does work out for you, but I think it's important to keep in mind that the odds of that happening are likely lower than just accepting that rate of return that you're going to get by delaying Social Security. Since I talked about a few reasons I don't agree with, let's talk about briefly a few reasons I would agree with. One, if you simply need the money, well, you need the money. If you need to collect Social Security benefits because you were forced to retire early and you don't have other savings, that's a good reason to collect it. I would say if there's a way to earn income in another job or something like that, if Social Security is your only income source, it potentially makes sense to try to do that as much as possible. But again, if you need the money, you need the money. There's no way around that. There's also something to be said for enjoying the money while you're younger. In Social Security analysis that I look at, if there's a difference of maybe $20,000 in benefits over your life, well, $20,000 earlier in your lifetime at age 62, maybe that's a lot better. And what I mean by that is $100 at age 62 is probably a lot more enjoyable than $100 at age 85. Now, that's not a perfect example, but it's just to help highlight that in those early years, you're probably going to get more fulfillment out of the money that you're receiving from Social Security than in those later years. But I don't want people to latch on to that idea and say, hey, I'm going to claim early because I want to enjoy it as much as possible, and then forego themselves in the future and not pay attention to what does healthcare cost, what do regular everyday expenses look like later on. Longevity is something that people should plan for and that we should look at in our retirement, because I think a lot of people underestimate how long they can potentially live, and we can look at Social Security tables to see what that looks like. If you have a low life expectancy, so let's say your parents died at early ages before age 80, you don't have great health or you're not anticipating great health in retirement, that could be a reason to claim it earlier. That is one that often comes up in conversations of, hey, we've done an online tool or I've talked to my doctor, I expect a bad health outcome in the next decade. Maybe then it does make sense because we're not going to get to age 80 or anywhere close to it, or the odds of it are pretty low. And then again, I talked about this briefly earlier, but if you have a spouse that maybe doesn't qualify for benefits and they could have spousal benefits off your earnings, that might be a reason to claim earlier. Again, run the calculation. Or if you have a child at home where they could receive part of your benefit, that also is a potential scenario. Let's look at an example in a Social Security analysis tool of what benefits would look like over joint lives for a married couple. So we're going to take Susie and Gabe's sample here. We have Susie on top that was born in 1964 and Gabe who was born in 1960. And we can see their primary insurance amounts of what they'd receive if they're going to claim at full retirement age. I've also assumed the life expectancy of age 95 for Susie and 85 for Gabe. You can play with different assumptions here to see what works best for you. But wanted to plan for some longevity because Susie's family tends to live fairly long, and maybe a normal life expectancy or so for Gabe. So we can see here, if we scroll down and expand, if they were to claim early, so both of them claiming as early as possible here, you can see Gabe's already 65, so he could start his benefit today if he wanted, and then Susie could do the same at age 62. What does that mean in terms of benefits? And you can see over here the cumulative difference that goes on for quite a while, all the way out until about age 81 for Susie and 85 for Gabe here, where you can start to see that the primary strategy of them waiting until certain ages, and I'll go through that in a minute, starts to pay off. So we can see here, what are the benefits over their joint lives if they wait? Well, it's almost $100,000. It's about $97,000 if they end up living to those life expectancies that we just talked about for them waiting. So this would show you that there are some good reasons to wait and not claim it as early as possible for them. And their primary strategy ended up being Susie beginning benefits at her age 63, Gabe deferring his until age 70. So again, he had the higher benefit and was older, so that made sense for him to wait to delay and claim that at a later date to get that increase per year. And then you can see where a lot of people don't quite realize what happens here is since Susie had a lower benefit, if Gabe passes away early, Susie's not going to receive both of their benefits. She's going to step up to the higher of the two benefits, and in this case, it's going to be Gabe's benefit. And we can go back and actually see that when we compare the strategies. So we can see here, partners, so that's Gabe here. We can see Susie has a lesser benefit, and then once Gabe passes away at age 85, you can see that instead of Susie claiming her benefit, she jumps up to the higher of their two benefits, which ends up being Gabe's. And this is a little bit higher just because we're assuming a cost of living adjustment here, where we can see if they both claimed early, you'll see here Susie has a much lower benefit, and then Gabe has a much lower benefit too, versus that primary strategy of waiting till age 70. And then when they pass away, you can see what comes in terms of income. That's a pretty significant difference. So if you have a married couple and you're worried about someone passing away earlier, which is often the case for a lot of folks, it can make a big difference waiting to claim those benefits at a later age to get that higher benefit. And now Susie can go on and claim that for the rest of her lives, all the way out until age 95, where you can see, what does that look like at the end of life in terms of earnings and everything else going on. So this is just one important point to note of how does this actually show up, and why does it make sense oftentimes to wait to claim benefits later? The reason you see these benefits decreasing over time is just because these values are shown in today's dollars. So this would actually be going up over time with cost of living adjustments, but we've brought these back to today's dollars. The next question becomes, what happens if we don't actually expect these same life expectancies? So what happens if Susie or Gabe passed away earlier than 95 and 85 respectively? What would that look like for them? And this is where it can get pretty interesting in the way that we look at this. So each of these colors corresponds to a different strategy, or said a different way, a different time frame for claiming their benefit. So we can see here with the primary strategy, with them living to 95 and 85 respectively, when does that make sense to claim? Well, it was roughly age 63 for Susie and age 70 for Gabe. But you can see here, this other strategy, maybe that's a little bit sooner. Maybe that is Susie claiming at 62 if Susie lived until age 95, and then Gabe lived to age 84. This because Susie's life expectancy is down here on the client and Gabe's here on the spousal. But you could look at this another way and look at this strategy. Maybe in this case, if Susie were to live to age 84 and Gabe at age 83, then it would make more sense to claim at 62 years and 69 years respectively. So this colorful chart is a great illustration of how sensitive this is to life expectancies, and that's why it's really important to run analysis for you in your life to figure out what is the best way to optimize benefits and what am I trying to protect for. Maybe this strategy works out in a lot of cases and I feel more comfortable with these life expectancies than this one. Obviously, it's not off too much in terms of when they're claiming. That's a small difference, but there can be other situations where there is a pretty wide difference. So I hope this helps shed some light on why it's important to do an analysis for you and why there aren't general rules of thumb when it comes to Social Security. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did and you stayed to the end and maybe you're curious about your own Social Security benefit, tax planning that I talked about earlier, and other planning opportunities that you can take, click down below. There's an opportunity to schedule with me. We can have a one-on-one consultation to see what opportunities exist in your life. Thanks for watching.